Hello, and welcome to Very Kimberly, the healed side of codependency. Throughout our dating relationship and up to our wedding day, Joe had promised to give up his old sinful lifestyle of drinking and casual promiscuity. And it's very important to note that Joe's family and friends had absolutely no idea of Joe's extracurricular activities. But Joe was adamant that he wanted to start following Jesus again and turn from that lifestyle. However, Joe was also adamant about going to New York City for our honeymoon, which was the same place where those sinful activities took place. So it was on our wedding night that I discovered another addiction that Joe struggled with: pornography. See, that night, Joe intentionally found the pornography channel at the hotel, left it on, much to my horror, and passed out asleep. And even though our honeymoon in New York City was very enjoyable in terms of seeing the sights, Joe would often leave me alone in the hotel room for hours, with very little explanation as to where he was. But in the beginning of my marriage to Joe, everything seemed perfect because I believed that we were in love. I excused any red flags and set my mind to be or do anything that Joe wanted because I thought that's what good wives did. That's what I witnessed my mother do my entire childhood. And I desperately wanted to be a good wife because my worst fear at that time was Joe not loving me anymore and rejecting me. I also desperately wanted to please God, still secretly believing that by being that perfect wife to my husband, God would bless me. Joe worked the night shift at a factory, and within a few short months of our marriage, I had landed a job in customer service at the local newspaper. We lived out in the country, which was an adjustment for this city girl, but I enjoyed it for the most part. Joe's sister Tracy lived right across the street, and their parents, Ellie and Troy, lived next to her house beyond some trees. We attended the Baptist church Joe belonged to, which was the same church that we were married in. And I finally felt like I had found that perfect family and belonging. See, when I moved to North Carolina to marry Joe, I was essentially moving into Joe's world, a very different world and culture from what I was familiar with. This made me very dependent on Joe's guidance in an environment I had no idea how to navigate. The house was in his name. We lived very close to his family. We went to his church, and any socialization was with his family and friends. So I was also dependent upon Joe's support system to be my own, because my support system, as dysfunctional as it was miles away in Pennsylvania. As time went on, though, Joe became very critical of my family. I used to talk to Mom on the phone almost every day when I lived in Pittsburgh. But even if Mom was the one who called me so that we wouldn't have a high phone bill, Joe's whole demeanor would change as if he disapproved. He would say that my family and friends were a bad influence. And it wasn't long before Joe started becoming critical of me too, albeit very subtly. See, Joe had this false image of what he believed a wife should be, and he used scripture to justify his expectations and demands. And if I didn't portray that image in every way, Joe would withhold his love and approval, or he would say things to imply that I wasn't obeying God. He also started using that great sense of humor that I loved so much when we first met as a way to tear down my confidence, playing off cruel words or insults as just joking. Joe also withheld quite a bit of information about the condition of his finances before we got married. There was a tremendous amount of debt tied to Joe's old lifestyle. But when I attempted to balance the bookkeeping without any knowledge of the extra debt, Joe blamed my bookkeeping skills and took complete control over the finances. Keep in mind that before I married Joe, I had no debt other than a car payment and a few credit cards that I was responsibly paying off. I also managed several bank accounts at the law firm in Pittsburgh where I worked as an office manager. So there was absolutely nothing wrong with my bookkeeping abilities in true reality. But now I had to ask permission to buy anything, even if my own paychecks were going into our joint bank account. And anything that belonged to me personally before we got married now belonged to my husband, including my financial independence. When it came to my own needs, like going to the eye doctor to get new contact lenses, I remember Joe saying that I should be grateful for the looks God gave me and just wear my old glasses that I no longer could see through very well. Joe would say that money was tight whenever I needed or wanted something, even though he made a very good salary at the factory, and no expense was spared whenever he needed or wanted something. What Joe wanted or needed came first. What I needed came last. And what I wanted? Well, that didn't matter much at all. Even Joe's mother, Ellie, commented how that was abusive. But I couldn't see it then and found the comment ridiculous. If Joe was happy, then I was happy because that meant I still had his love. And Joe would just tell his own mother to mind her own business. It was around this same time that Joe convinced me to quit my job and be a stay-at-home wife. And at first, I loved the idea. Since Joe worked at night, I would sleep on his schedule, clean all night long, make dinner in the morning for when he came home from work, and go to bed when he went to bed. My whole entire life revolved around Joe. What he wanted to do, where he wanted to go, etc. And little by little, piece by piece, Joe began to erase who I was as a person. But see, in the beginning, it didn't seem to matter that much to me because each piece I gave up of myself, I received that love, acceptance, validation, and approval from Joe. With each piece I gave up of myself, It seemed like Joe was filling those emotional voids. But what I ignored was the fact that each piece of myself that I held on to was met with swift disapproval from Joe, and often conflict and arguing, as if he never really loved me, but the person he wanted me to be. And I desperately wanted to be that person he loved. So, within only 6 months of us being married, I became pregnant with our first daughter. During the entire pregnancy, Joe was extremely attentive, kind, loving, and helpful. Joe instantly became everything I believed that he was when I married him. All of a sudden, Joe was finally treating me like I was the most important person in his life, which made me feel like I had finally found worth and value as a person in his eyes. But once our daughter Susie was born, it became very clear that I was on my own to figure out motherhood, with absolutely no real support system at all, because my life was still all about Joe. I hope that you'll join me next time, and until then, this is very Kimberly encouraging you to keep striving to be on the healed side of codependency.